Good evening. Good evening and welcome to this public event for the Sustainability in Prisons Project Conference. I want to welcome everyone, just an amazing group of people here tonight, coming really from different worlds of academics, of corrections, of sustainability, and of conservation. And I would like to first welcome our guests. We have about 40 people coming from 9 different states, all of whom are working in one degree or another with the concept and the practice of the Sustainability in Prisons Project. So we'll be here for 2.5 days together. We've had 1.5 wonderful days of getting together and exchanging ideas and experiences and questions and answers. But I would also like to welcome the members of the community who are here from those 4 different worlds, and to thank them for choosing to come to this event tonight rather than one of the 6 other big events that are happening on campus this evening. So welcome all of you. Before we start, I'd like to thank a few people. First of all, the 2 people who really did the legwork and the brain work on organizing this conference, and that is Emily Gaines here and Antonio Fitzgerald, and I really want to thank them for their work in organization. I'd also like to thank the leaders of the team from the Washington Sustainability in Prisons Project, Dan Pacholke and Carrie Leroy, and they are also organizing the national network that we'll be talking about. So again, thanks for your work in terms of being collaborators on the proposal, on the workshop, and on what we'll be following. And lastly, I'd like to thank the National Science Foundation, which is really thanking all of you taxpayers because it is in fact a government agency, but they are the ones who sponsored this conference and the conference that preceded this conference a few months ago, where we first got together as a group and as a nascent network to understand how we might do a better job with the Sustainability in Prisons Project. A couple of things in terms of logistics. We will be speaking, and we have 3 speakers lined up, very short speakers coming. Well, they are. One of them is a very short speaker, but I mean they're one of the short time speakers will be talking tonight, and we will be getting out. We'll be finishing up about 9 o'clock, but we can stay till 9:30. So there'll be plenty of time to mingle and to talk together. I want to point out the pictures on the table. These are images that Benj Drummond and Sarah Joy Steele took in the early days of the Sustainability in Prisons Project. And if you want to take a look at those, pass those around just to get a feel for what this project has been doing. We also have the posters from the folks who came here from different states, and you can take a look at those. And finally, there are some donation cards that you can see on your table, and if you feel moved to make a donation or take those home and learn more about the Center for Science and Math Education and the Sustainable Prisons Project, we welcome you to do that. So to begin with, I'd like to set the SPP, as we call it, conference in the context of the university here. This is a project that our Math Education. The mission of that center is to build programs, provide resources, and foster partnerships in academia and the community that promote understanding and enthusiasm for math and science. We have 4 basic parts of our mission. One is to train K-12 science teachers. A second is to improve undergraduate education in STEM topics. A third is to enhance the diversity of people who engage in the scientific enterprise. And the fourth is to bring science into the community. So as you might imagine, those last 2 missions of ours, to increase diversity and to bring science into the community, is really where this conference fits in. Well, we might ask, what is the Sustainability in Prisons Project? You'll hear more details with our first speakers, but I'll just mention that it began in Washington in 2005 with the prison guide Dan Pacholke and a tree gal, I guess we call ourselves, who wanted to do some work with mosses and to learn how to grow them sustainably. That ended up turning into a project in Washington State that bloomed into many, many projects and programs. The mission of the SPP is to bring science and nature into prisons and help reduce the environmental, the economic, and the human costs of incarceration. This project, as you will hear later on tonight, has grown remarkably and has been started in other states. They began really popping up just a couple of years ago, and in order to link them productively, to allow each of these states to have both a voice and an ear in terms of how we can improve this work, we decided to pull together a set of action plans at the state level and the national level to move this project and this program forward. I think what has been emerging has been very significant, and just in listening to the talks today at our conference, I began thinking about how this project is really about opening portals between worlds. I think we all recognize that we come both professionally and personally from different worlds. We have different cultures, different languages, different values in terms of thinking about corrections, academics, sustainability, and conservation. And I think each world has its own problems, very difficult problems that it's very difficult to move if you sort of stay within your world. And when we think about the immovable problems that we come up to face, in corrections, we know that our problem involves the 2.3 million Americans that are now incarcerated. How do we move and transform them into productive citizens? In the world of academia, we have to reach minds to inspire people who can't necessarily come to our classrooms. And perhaps even more important, to change their own self-image from being somebody who can't learn science to someone who can learn science. In the world of sustainability, the big problem is how do we minimize energy and material footprints? How do we restore populations of endangered species? And the problem that society faces, how to revise the ways that we judge people so that all of us who are deserving of respect might become engaged in education, might be welcomed into the research enterprise. Given those enormous problems that seem so heavy and so unchangeable, I think that what the Sustainability in Prisons Project has done is to look to another sphere in order to get answers to those questions and those problems. And so just as we know we can't push the trunk of a large tree, it simply won't move. If we turn to another world, another sphere, that is the sphere of the twigs and the leaves, we might find that in fact there is movement. And that movement might in fact affect the kinds of change we want to see. So I think here today you're going to hear about solving big problems by looking elsewhere, looking in some other world and making small changes that will advance the solving of these large problems. What I'd like you to realize is that in the next 3 talks we'll be covering 3 topics. There'll be 3 speakers. First, we'll be hearing from the Washington State Sustainability in Prisons Project, and they will recount for us the amazing history of their work so far, from its very early beginnings with a single small project to the amazing work that they're doing today. Secondly, we'll hear from Craig Ulrich. He carried out a small piece of work, composting, worm composting in a single minimum security prison, but he has moved forward in his own life to achieve remarkably amazing things in academia. And we'll hear from Tammy Getz, who really exemplifies strength in a small package, and she will talk about the need for science and math education, and relating that here to the state of Utah and how the Sustainability in Prison Project might relate to those. So what I'd like to do now is to bring to the podium Carrie Leroy. Dr. Carrie Leroy is a faculty member at the Evergreen State College. She's been there for 8 years. She's an aquatic biologist, and she 2 years ago took over the co-directorship of the Washington State Sustainability in Prison Project. Carrie.
Thanks, Nalini. Hello, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here tonight, and it's very exciting to see all of you, especially everyone from all over the country who's really been inspired by this project, as I have been. I think that it really exemplifies partnership and collaboration in a way that makes me happy in my own work, but expands to really help us understand how collaboration can be a powerful agent of change across communities of all different kinds. So I'd just like to say a few things about SPP, and then I'm going to turn it over to 2 people who are very, very involved in the project. So one of the core tenets of SPP is that we have multiple partnerships, but that at any given moment, all partners benefit. And so we really like to think of the SPP as a program where we have students benefiting from interesting experiences. Working with the program, we have inmates benefiting from the therapeutic work with nature and learning interesting things about science. We have scientists like myself benefiting by getting our students engaged in interesting research. We have Department of Corrections staff and administrators who benefit because prisons become safer places potentially. The society benefits because people who are involved in our programs may be less likely to commit violent crimes against society once they get out. And hopefully they're involved in some transformative process. Everything that we do with SPP involves some kind of a transformation, and we hope that it is a reflection for the inmates involved in our programming of their own transformation while they're in prison. So I would like to bring to the podium Mr. Dan Pacholke, who's the Assistant Secretary of the Washington State Department of Corrections, and Andrea Martin, who's a graduate student at the Evergreen State College in the Masters of Environmental Studies program. And I think they exemplify for us kind of the range in partners that we bring to the table. You have the second in command at a state agency, and you have a graduate student who's mired in you can really say the muck, because she's been out surveying for frogs for the last couple months. So please welcome Dan and Andrea.
Hello. All right, we're here tonight to tell you a story, and we'll begin with fire. Fire suppression has been a policy of many U.S. land management agencies since the early 20th century. It was originally thought to be protective of resources and safer for neighboring communities. However, ecological research shows us that fire is beneficial and necessary to most ecosystems. Without fire, forests face disease, stagnation, and overcrowding, and can in turn suffer from bigger and more catastrophic wildfires. Prairies need fires too. At Joint Base Lewis-McChord, the site of artillery training is also one of the most productive prairies in western Washington. The fires cleanse the ground of accumulated vegetation, allow species to spread their seeds, and halt the growth of encroaching fir trees that alter the ecosystem. In short, that artillery fire mimics a natural disturbance that we need for healthy, vibrant, and productive prairies.
We tell you about disturbances not only because one of our most successful projects is directly related to prairie restoration, but also because our story is one of organizational disturbance as well. I mean, SPP started as a small project in a single correctional facility, and certainly now has expanded to a national network. So it's a product of many partnerships, egos, agendas, and ideas, and with that comes conflict, and it comes challenges. So it really is through the process of trying to meet, mutual goals and trying to keep your eye on where you want to go, or what you want to contribute that has really led to our success. So the disturbances in some ways have furthered our own growth. I'm Dan Pacholke. I'm the Assistant Secretary of the Prisons Division of the State Department of Corrections. I'm also the co-director of the Washington Sustainability and Prison Project, and I'm proud to say I played some small role in the development of this initiative.
And I'm Andrea Martin. I'm a graduate research assistant with SPP. When I was an undergraduate at San Francisco State University, I never, ever thought I would work with corrections. But it has been truly one of the most rewarding things I've ever done with my life, and has really opened my eyes to the possibilities of working with prisons and prisoners.
So just as a little background on prison, I mean, prison by its design is intended to be routine. I mean, there's protocols and policy on nearly everything. Movements are timed, counts are scheduled. But what we know as practitioners is that routine can lead to boredom, boredom can lead to complacency, and in a prison environment, complacency can lead to violence. So we need to continue to challenge ourselves, and although SPP didn't start out with the intention of making prisons safer, that is one of the byproducts of the project that we've seen so far. So how did we start? I mean, I get that question all the time. As a matter of fact, I got it when I was sitting at the table over there earlier. So for me, it really was a happenstance meeting between a prison superintendent and a forest ecologist. Nalini Nanakardi and I bumped into each other at a volunteer banquet, and we started talking about mutual interest or ideas. I didn't have any money to do anything interesting. Matter of fact, we were in a budget crisis. Nalini wanted answers to scientific questions, and she wanted to employ the assistance of inmates or men with nothing but time. So from that beginning, really what we had was a handshake agreement. I mean, there was no budget, there was no strategic plan, there was no mission statement. We just really had a commitment to do something different. So when you start down a road like that, and you don't have any money to begin with, it really gets challenging on what you do from there. So in a true sense of just reuse, what we did is we picked up an old 60-foot roof with a crane, we set it on top of some ecology blocks, and we said, by God, we're going to start composting. So it was a zero-cost kind of solution. You know, from there, it wasn't long, and we had other projects going on, and eventually Nalini wanted to bring in some lecturers to talk to inmates about different projects. We brought in some people to talk about organic gardening. So we thought to ourselves, well, let's tear up some of this green space and flower space, and let's convert it to gardens to grow tomatoes and onions and garlic and cilantro. And we took those products to the kitchen where we made salsa that we served to the prison community, partly because I love salsa. And that's really how we started. I mean, it was from, you know, a simple idea. We used the most innovation we had because we didn't have any money to begin with.
In Pacific Northwest forests, mosses are harvested at an unsustainable rate for use in the horticulture trade. The Moss in Prisons project, as it came to be called, was a new piece of SPP programming. The project employed incarcerated men in raising mosses and developing optimal methods for cultivation to educate the outside community. Additionally, it was intended to investigate whether work with living things could be therapeutic. We can't say yet that our work is therapeutic. However, we can say that giving inmates meaningful opportunities to contribute and engagement in meaningful activities does make prisons safer, both for inmates and for staff. And the Moss in Prisons project was our first conservation project. From there, we've grown to raising endangered frogs and butterflies and more than 50 species of rare and threatened prairie plants for transplant onto the South Puget Sound.
So you know, we go from raising mosses, and it wasn't long, and we started experimenting with vermicomposting, you know, just to have some challenges of beyond normal composting. So we wanted to do something different, and it just added a new project to our kind of arsenal. Along the way, as we worked with partners and we shared ideas, you know, we bumped into the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, who asked us if we wanted to participate as a rearing station to raise the endangered Oregon spotted frog. There were 4 zoos during it currently at that time. So in a typical kind of Cedar Creek fashion, we got a couple 300-gallon tubs, and we threw them underneath the roof line, and we thought, all right, we're going to get in the business of raising endangered frogs. We had the benefit, you know, scientists came in and worked with our grad students and the inmate population and taught them rearing methods and protocols, and certainly taught the inmates how to document those methods and how to identify age and sex. So that first year when we were raising the frogs, we had about an 85% survivorship rate. Out of the 5 rearing stations that we're doing it, we have the largest and healthiest frogs of any rearing station. Prison frogs.
And at about the same time, SPP began partnerships with the Nature Conservancy and Joint Base Lewis McChord to start a restoration nursery program, raising endangered prairie plants at Stafford Creek Correction Center, a major facility in Aberdeen, Washington. Concurrently, sustainable operations were taking off throughout Washington. Oh no. Oh, we're running out of power. Okay. I think it's a computer. Beekeeping was taken up at several facilities. Workshops on the topic were offered both to inmates and to staff. Recycling programs expanded and gave inmates new opportunities to give back through wheelchair and bicycle repair programs. And the development of sophisticated in-vessel composting systems not only increased efficiencies in waste management, but also allowed the facilities to take in food waste from local schools and businesses and cut their costs as well.
So we're going along, you know, working on our project, and in about 2010, the state of Washington was going through severe economic pressures, not unlike what was occurring around the country. So at that very time, what happened is our budget was cut. The SPP budget was cut in total. We had some savings, so we're working on a little bit of savings, and really the classroom program was imminent. We knew that we were going to end here at any time. And as you can see from the chart, certainly in that era, the vast majority of the money was provided by DOC. But it really was at that very moment where our emphasis on partnerships really came in. As we got close to collapse, the Evergreen State College came through with emergency bridge funding that helped extend us out for a few more months. Joint Base Lewis McChord enhanced our contract on the Prairie Plant project, and we came through it. So having learned from that disturbance, as we learned from many of them, what we wanted was a much more diversified funding portfolio. We didn't want one person to be able to bring us down, and certainly as you fast forward to today, you can see that about 50% of all funding comes from other grant sources, other funding sources, and we're not dependent upon a single contract.
So our resiliency was also tested in the form of a change of leadership. Nalini came here to Utah 2 years ago, and Carrie Leroy stepped in as our new co-director. And it was through that multitude of disturbances, at least I think, and I think a lot of people are in agreement with me on this, that kind of spurned a lot of growth. And the project has grown tremendously in the last year. We hosted the first SPP Network Conference in September at Evergreen State College, where representatives from nearly a dozen states and counties came together to talk about how to best grow SPP programs into a national standard in prison design and education. One of the things we discussed at our conference was how to best incorporate SPP's 5 essential components. Through 8 years of collaboration and growth, we've come to realize that there are 5 things that make any SPP program truly SPP. And those are partnerships with multiple benefits, bringing nature inside, both to inmates and staff, safe and sustainable operations, evaluation and dissemination, and education and training. Prisons are places where learning is happening all the time, whether for the good or the bad. We want to make sure that the education we bring empowers inmates to change their lives and change their communities. But the punchline of our work, the simplest mission we have, and kind of the sum of these things put together is to demonstrate the possibility of a successful and sustainable model. And we couldn't do that without partnerships.
Certainly at the core of the partnership in the early years, and certainly even today in Washington State, rests the Evergreen State College and the State Department of Corrections. And in some ways, those two partnerships are woven together in a way, and there's a tension created around it where if you tried to pull it apart, it would resist it. I think at many different levels and many different organizational contrasts. I mean, we have, inmates working on sustainability projects. We have officers and counselors that are supervising and providing security for those very projects. We have faculty at Evergreen State College that are, writing grants, doing many back office functions, recruiting lecturers. And we certainly have students at the Evergreen State College that are purchasing supplies and moving scientists around and pulling leads at some points in time.
Evergreen and DOC are not the extent of our partnerships. As you can see, we have an intricate web of people and organizations that are committed to our programs. Partnerships are the source of our strength and our continued success, but they're also the source of some of our greatest disturbances. Each prison, administrator, scientist, student, professor, scientist, I said scientist twice, have their own needs and agendas. And it's difficult to meet everybody all the time. In the media, it's nearly impossible to truly represent the intricate balance of energies that is needed to make each of our programs successful, which often makes recognition a source of frustration. One of our biggest challenges in Washington is to create recognition for the work that each prison's staff do. Without their commitment to our projects, they just wouldn't work. They put in the day in and day out on all of our projects. However, they're easily the most overlooked by fans of our program. But again, it's the tension, it's the frustration, it's the disturbance that makes people better and stronger and makes us keep trying to improve.
So it's not long when you get into something like this that eventually somebody wants to talk to you about outcome measures. I mean, I'm much better at running gun kind of philosophy, but people want to know what's the effectiveness of what you're doing. And certainly from a sheer sustainable operations standpoint, you can kind of see that we've achieved quite a few outcomes as it relates to reducing costs within the Washington State prison system. What was most impressive to me, and I continue to be impressed by it, is kind of the unintended consequence of what you can achieve. And I've got a couple different benchmarks here I can give you, but certainly between the years 2005 and 2010, we created a $3.5 million cost avoidance for the Department of Corrections.
Additionally, through lecture series programs, SPP has facilitated nearly 100 lectures and 30 workshops at Washington State prisons. Inmates have also gotten the opportunity to participate in research studies and have been listed as co-authors on both presentations and scientific articles. And currently 9 graduate students are employed by the Sustainability in Prisons Project, getting valuable research experience as well as part-time employment and a lot of resume building as well.
So, I mean, when we talk about outcomes from a prison operations standpoint, we've achieved every bit as much from an environmental restoration standpoint. Literally every year we produce hundreds of thousands of over 50 different varieties of endangered prairie plants in order to repropagate them in different locations around the state. This year we're poised to double our production through the addition of new hoop houses and greenhouses at the Washington Corrections Center for Women. The Butterfly Project, or the Taylor Checker Spot Butterfly Restoration Project at the Mission Creek Corrections Center for Women is starting its second year of raising the Taylor Checker Spot butterfly. In 2012, we released over 700 butterflies to the wild. Those butterflies are dependent upon the prairie plants that SPP raises. Those plants are dependent upon fire and disturbance. The Frog Project, in its 4th year of operation, has produced in excess of 600 frogs and certainly been a model rearing station for 2 or 3 years out of all the rearing stations. And we had some inmates have their names appear in the New York Times along the way.
So after 8 years of growth and success, we can't help but think about the future. Many of us are here right now as part of the second SPP Network Conference to discuss our action plans and how to continue to grow new programs in prisons across the country. Additionally, SPP Washington is spreading across the state. Our East Side prisons are in talks now to develop a new conservation project raising plants for the shrub steppe, a disappearing high desert ecosystem. The number of graduate students in our program has doubled in less than a year, and we think up new research ideas and new positions every week or two. It's easy at times to feel limited by funding and space, but we have only to look at where we were 8 years ago to know that our only limitation is how big we can dream.
Yeah, as Andrew talks about dreaming big, I mean, just think about the future if we're able to influence the design of prisons to be zero waste and carbon neutral, and if we're able to enhance community safety by providing inmates with meaningful opportunities to contribute. You know, today there are 17,000 men and women incarcerated in the Washington State Department of Corrections. There's about 2.5 million men and women in prisons, in jails, both at the federal, state, and county level throughout the United States. So what if we were able to put 3 conservation projects in 3 prisons in each state, similar to Washington's frogs, butterflies, and prairie plants? If that was a possibility, then this year alone we would release 12,300 frogs to the wild. We would release some 35,000 butterflies, and we would replant some 20 million rare and endangered prairie plants to disappearing ecosystems. And that's just 3 projects in 3 prisons in each state. So just imagine the possibility if we're able to expand to juvenile detention centers or drug rehabilitation centers or nursing homes and engage them in similar projects as what we've shown possible through SPP. So what if we could also engage offices, schools, homes, and communities just to challenge the complacency of the everyday and expect more of themselves and those that work around them in order to engage in other sustainable activities as we've shown is completely possible. So part of the disturbance for us, or the tension of our projects, is what has allowed us to achieve success and certainly allowed us to maybe inspire some others. So we hope we've provided some inspiration here for you today, both to carry on with the project and hopefully think big, dream big, and add on to what we've talked about here over the last couple days. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Gosh, I know this history, and I got chills down my spine listening to that history talk. So we're going to have time for questions and answers after all three of the talks are given, and I'm sure there are many questions and comments that can grow from that. I'd like to introduce our next speaker. This is Craig Ulrich. Craig grew up in California in the Mojave. He did his undergraduate work at the University of Washington in Seattle, but I met him when he was incarcerated at Cedar Creek Correction Center, the same prison where I met Dan and where the Sustainability in Prison project began. This was at the stage, it was early on in the history of the SPP. We had gotten the Moss in Prison project going, we had gotten some gardens going, and we had done some composting, but we also knew that we wanted to go beyond just regular composting and move into vermiculture, into worm composting. And Craig took on that task. He did an excellent job. He worked quietly and carefully. He kept great records. And as it turned out, he had one of the best data sets that concerned composting of any I had ever seen. And so we sat down together and said, you know, we could publish a paper on this. We could introduce this into a peer-reviewed publication. And that's exactly what happened. Craig worked on his part of it with diligence. Dan Pacholke was sort of the go-between. We couldn't actually send back electronic files because of the sort of the curtain between the outside world and the inside world. Nonetheless, despite those barriers, we were able to publish it with Craig as the senior author in a scientific journal that allowed other people to understand what they might need to do in terms of vermiculture. He also, as soon as he got out of prison, the Ecological Society of America meeting was taking place in August. It's the big ecological meeting for the entire U.S., and we were able to get him a passage to the Midwest where he gave a very well-received talk at a scientific meeting about the work that he had done behind bars. When he was released, he applied for and got into the University of Nevada at Reno and is very close to receiving his PhD. So I'm going to let Craig tell his story. He's a remarkable scientist and a remarkable man. Thanks for joining us, Craig.
Thank you, Nalini. Just a pre-warning, I'm going to be telling basically the same story as Dan. Actually, I'm using one of your slides. Unbeknownst to me or you, but it'll be from a different perspective as the journey from an inmate to a scientist. And I kind of titled this talk as How Integrating Hands-On Science Curriculum Can Improve the Quality of Our Correctional Institutions. And this is obviously from the opposite vision as an inmate rather than someone trying to implement this to the inmates. As Nalini stated, my story begins at the University of Washington. I was studying cellular and molecular biology, working at several labs. One was a marine molecular biotechnology lab. The other was a pediatric molecular neuro-oncology lab. Progressing as you would towards medical school, the usual stuff. And then during my senior year, I was involved in loss of life crime and was sentenced to 4 years in prison. And this is where the interesting story begins. So my higher learning at some other state institutions. During my travels, I stayed at 3 different state institutions. The first is Shelton, which is kind of receiving and dispersion. Everyone goes there. It's a rather boring, monotonous place. You're in your cell 23 hours a day. You get out for food. The place I saw the most violence and fights was at Shelton, mainly because of the stagnant nature of what was going on. From there, I was moved to the maximum and medium security institution at Clallam Bay. Very similar to Shelton, you're in your cell a lot. You're lucky to get out, play cards, maybe lift weights. High concrete walls, razor wire, the usual. So I was there 6 or 8 months, can't remember, but then I got a refreshing change. I was sent to a minimum security work camp at Cedar Creek Correctional Center. And the majority of inmates there work for the Department of Natural Resources, fighting fires in the summer, clearing trees in the winter. With my biology background, I talked to Dan at the time, and he had this fledgling compost program. So I asked him if I could get in on it and use my scientific background to try to help on my end grow this program. And this is where this vermicomposting story happens. I'd never really heard of vermicomposting. My mom used to compost the old school way, just throw everything in a bucket, flip it around. Voila, you have dirt. So Dan's like, hey, we got these cool worms. Let's try this composting thing. So with his help, we designed some worm bins and different methods of trying to implement this style of composting. which it turns out is really cool. They call it black gold, the actual castings that come out of the worm, because they're amazing fertilizers. And you can make worm tea and get rid of aphids and all kinds of crazy crap that I didn't believe, but was actually true. So we implemented this, and like Nalini said, during this process of doing the compost, I took meticulous notes on how much waste was coming in, how much compost was going out. I took temperature measurements just because I'm a science nerd. It's kind of in my nature to do those kind of things. And took these notes, and Dan introduced me to Nalini. There's their slide. I can use it with permission because that's actually me. So, and the worm compost bins we made. But I met Nalini, and she's like, okay, you have all this data. Let's go ahead and write up a story. And on the right side, you can see a graph of the kilograms of waste that we were removing from the waste stream per year. You can see in 2004, when the program started, it was better than zero. But as we got better, as our food pullers in the kitchen got better, as the whole environment of embracing this sustainability thing got better, we went up to roughly 15,000 kilograms of waste coming out of the waste stream. And we did other studies on the reduction in total suspended solids in the wastewater plants and all kinds of stuff. And you just see all of these unintended consequences, as Dan said. The other part was we had all this compost to fertilize those organic gardens and flowers and just amazing gardens and food. And I believe I was the one that liked the salsa, and that's why we had the peppers and tomatoes. But so we published this paper in the journal Environment Development and Sustainability, titled Sustainability Research and Practices in Enforced Residential Institutions, Collaborations of Ecologists and Prisoners. And I believe it really was an awesome collaboration, because I had 5, 6 to 10, depending on the season, inmates working with me on implementing this type of composting and gardening and just the whole community of ecology coming together from the prisoner side. And we also had help from Dan and Nalini to give us the outside influence and help that we needed to acquire materials or seeds or extra compost if we wanted to make a bigger garden. And I didn't know that you guys were going to say the 5 tenets, but I read them the other day. And from my perspective and my story, I believe that they really show promise if they can be implemented. And the collaboration that I state that's integral for these 5 tenets is between Dan, Nalini, and I. Now it's kind of changed because Dan's not the superintendent of Cedar Creek, but I think it's even more powerful now that he's in the position that he's in. Bringing green inside the prisons. We had the compost project, the organic farming, the beekeeping. This all helped maintain a constructive environment. And I was talking with Dan earlier, I think it's important to keep inmates involved and their brains, rather than constantly thinking about what am I going to do next, giving them a project so they don't have to think about it. Just give them the ability to get away from the monotony. And for me personally, it allowed me to learn biology in a context different than what was taught at a large institution such as UW. Hands-on, very difficult because I'd have to handwrite stuff and give it to someone to type because we didn't have access. It was just a different ballgame, but you learn to appreciate and look at what we have in a different way. And as far as lowering violence, I think all operations that I was involved in were copacetic. There was no problems. People that were on my staff didn't want to get in fights, didn't want to have problems because they didn't want to lose the position they had. It was, it was nice. It was cush. We got to play with plants. We got to dig holes, whatever. It's better than sitting in your cell all day. And dissemination, I think that's the most important, is getting what's happening out to the public. And we were able to do that through that peer-reviewed journal. And Nalini and I were talking, I think the next tenet's going to try to be to understand how this benefits people after they leave. And it's going to be a difficult prospect, but I think it's integral to be able to follow and say, hey, yeah, our people that are involved in our projects not only are less likely to come back to prison, but they use these tools to further their daily life once they're released. And currently, in my case, I'm at the University of Nevada School of Medicine. This is the title of my dissertation. Don't be intimidated. It's Intimations on the Regulation of Myometrial Functions, lesson from the proteome and S-nitrosoproteome in human preterm labor. So coming from raising worms in prison to defending the dissertation. And this is the cover I'm proposing for PNAS for my work. the proteomic network that's involved in the induction of labor. I think it's just cool that being able to traverse the stigma of being a prisoner, it hasn't held me back at all. And I think people can learn from me, from Nalini, from Dan, that prisoners aren't always going to be scum. You might think that sometimes, but they're people. They're able to be taught. They're able to learn. And I think they're out to go and do amazing things. My future direction is to continue in science. I'm going to switch to pharmacoproteomics because I want some money, and it's the future of personalized medicine. But and hence the last one, maybe get a real job. And with that, I really want to thank Nalini for inviting me to speak, and Dan for coming and sharing how this project's grown, and everyone for showing up. Thanks.
Thank you, Craig. Our third speaker, Tammy Getz, is here with us tonight. I asked Tammy to come tonight because I think it's wonderful to hear about the incredible things that are going on across the country. But for those of us who live here, I think one of the questions we have is what can we do here? What are the kinds of things that academicians, that corrections people, that conservationists, and that those who work with sustainability, what can we do here in this wonderful state of Utah? We are at a very early stage in our own development in terms of the Utah Sustainability in Prisons Project. We've aligned some potential partners with the Utah Department of Corrections and the county sheriff's office. We've engaged a number of faculty in the biology and chemistry and physics department who wish to give lectures in Utah prisons and jails when we line that up. We've been working with community partners about the possibilities of helping to revegetate the Jordan River that runs through our city and runs actually right past Draper Prison and our jails. So we have lots of pieces in place, but we think also that it's important for you to think about what would it mean to us as a state in terms of increasing the number of people, the number especially of underserved people who might engage in science and math education. And whenever you think about science and math education in the state of Utah, you immediately think of Tammy Getz. And she's going to speak to us and tell us a little bit about the idea of STEM education, which has recently gotten a wonderful boost from our legislature, the job scene in terms of the needs that we have in terms of science graduates, and the overall scene in terms of science and math, people who are engaged in science and math in our state. So Tammy is I guess officially she's the former advisor to our governor, but she still continues in that role as that transition takes place. She has taken on a new and wonderful position as the assistant dean for external relations in the College of Science and Health at Utah Valley University. So she remains with us in terms of being in higher education now directly, helping with collaborations that may lead to further partnerships between academia and corrections. Tammy, thanks for coming tonight.
So I'm beginning to think the only reason Nalini invited me is so she could make short jokes. And I was going to bring a chair up, but podium's actually, I'm going to move this over a little bit if I can, because I'm trying to wean myself off of PowerPoint presentations, and also because I had no idea what I really wanted to talk about tonight to some extent, and I wanted to hear what people had to say, so I didn't want to be locked into a PowerPoint. And so, how many people, STEM is probably one of the most overused and misused terms, at least in my experience in the last 3 weeks in our Utah State legislative session. How many people, if I say STEM, know exactly what I'm talking about without any clarification? Okay, well let me just really quick. STEM is just this nice, sexy little acronym we use for science, technology, engineering, and math. And it really is a wonderful term in many ways, but it also is a term in which we all get a little bit paralyzed by trying to define it. So I don't want to define it for you other than to say, really the way in which we use it for workforce and education is that it's where we use our science and our math as a platform to build up into the engineering and technology-based applied fields. And it's as simple as that. It's no big deal. It's just an acronym we use. And And so I was thinking about this and like, why STEM? Why there's the economic point of it, but I want to tell you a little bit of a story after I heard some of the previous talks. We've been building out STEM-based programs in our state since probably 2000, 2001, with the beginning of a high school and a college partnership for a hands-on applied laboratory program that began for juniors in high school and it went all the way through an undergraduate baccalaureate program in biotechnology. And we've got these wonderful facilities we built out in a high school facility where college students come in and do lab work and get their 2- and 4-year degree side by side with high school kids. And they really are beautiful facilities. And we would bring in our higher ed colleagues from the University of Utah, Utah Valley University, Utah State. We'd bring in legislators. And they would say, and we had these very sophisticated projects going on. And we had a small contract company embedded in these programs, Innova Bio, which is a little nonprofit company that we started back in 2004 with help of the National Science Foundation, where kids work on contracted projects from local life science companies. And they would be like, wow, the kids that come into this program must be like the top 10%, the cream of the crop, the kids that are just going to really, and we're like, actually, let us tell you a little story about one of our students, Veronica. She came in as a junior in high school into our biotech program. In our shared lab facility where we shared the high school biotech program with the college program. And she showed up, and I will tell you right now, I looked at that kid, and I saw her attitude, and she said, I'm only here for a week, and then I'm out, because I'm going to go get a job, and I'm going to do something. And we're like, whew. I looked at my high school colleague who taught the program, Gina, and I said, it's days like this, honey, I am glad you're teaching the high school side of the house, and I'm on the college side. She is all yours, my dear. And Veronica was a problem. She'd been in and out of some of the youth programs for at-risk kids. We have some of these schools that are kind of sequestered for problem children to work out their issues before they're released back into the normal traditional schools. She caused no small amount of trouble. Made it very clear that she had nothing. She came from the Compton area in LA. She just moved here with her family. She didn't care about school. And it was evident she didn't. And long story short, Veronica became one of our top high school kids. She came back to do a research project with the local company as a senior, received $5,000 in scholarships. She's now working on her PhD at UCSD. And, we all have these stories. And Veronica's one of the many kids that come in to our programs and struggles because they are not that top 10%. They're the kids looking for just something to keep them engaged, something that gives them purpose and gives them a reason to come to school, to get them out of bed. And so I asked myself, why do I tell this story? Well, it's because when I listened to the first talk, from SPP, I realized, I know why STEM. I know why we're doing this in Utah, why we're really engaging our STEM efforts in our K through 16. It's because we want you to keep your jobs, but we want you to be a little less busy. We'd like to keep those kids out of your institutions and moving towards the educational institutions and not have to go through what you did, Craig. If we can make you a little less busy, but let you keep, you're never going to lose your job. There'll always be people out there we just can't keep off of the wrong path. But STEM has really, I thought, in our programs we've established in Utah, our STEM programs, which are very innovative, I think. We have like I said, we have now two nonprofit companies in which kids work on contracted projects in teams with high school and college students. We also have a business incubator for life science companies, for pharmaceuticals and medical device companies, in which we have 7 startup companies and a high school technical institute. And we have students that are innovating and making real commercializable products with companies, startup companies. And we've got a 17-year-old girl that's writing a patent right now on a new IV clamp design for fetal tubing, IV tubing. We have a 19-year-old kid that's working on a new design on a fetal heart monitor belt in collaboration with Intermountain Healthcare, one of our hospitals. And these kids are doing real things. So that's why STEM. That's why we do STEM in the secondary and post-secondary world. It's because the skills and aptitudes required to do these problem-solving, engaging, are what keep our kids down this path, that's the good path, not that path that ends up being in business with you. Worm composting is great, it really is, but I'd rather have them compost worms in high school than in a correctional institute, right? And so if we kind of take what can we do in Utah, it's to engage our younger population. And we can work, of course, you asked me what are we doing now and what can we do more of, and that's what I believe is where we need to play a huge role. And maybe perhaps giving our high school students that are really going down the wrong path a vision of what's coming for them. Now let me kind of shift over into, what does STEM look like in terms of opportunity. STEM education and workforce development is the buzzword nationally, right? If you're not doing STEM, you miss the memo. Currently, if you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics through the Department of Labor, the U.S. Department of Labor, 16 of the 20 fastest growing jobs between now and 2024 will be STEM related. In Utah alone, our Department of Workforce Services is projecting that in the next 5 years, we're going to have at least 105,000, if not more, jobs that need to be filled that are directly STEM jobs. They're not even STEM related. They are STEM jobs in the biopharmaceutics, in the diagnostics, in the medical devices, aerospace and defense, IT and software engineering. Right now, we have an Air Force base up north that is saying that they need 200 computer and software engineers and electrical engineers, double E's, every year for the next 10 years based upon their contract with the Department of Defense. And I'm pretty sure that our story is not much different than Washington's. It's probably even less of a demand in many ways. And so there is an amazing amount of job opportunity in STEM areas. And the really good news is if you're not really a science person, one of the real problems we have in STEM right now, there's a real disconnect. If you look at the study that currently came out a few months ago from Georgetown, Anthony Carnevale, we are actually producing a lot of STEM majors. Most people are thinking, oh my God, there's a dearth of STEM majors, we've got to get more kids into the pipeline because we're just not graduating enough. Well, yes and no. We do need to get more kids into the STEM pipeline. We need to work with our adult populations that could really benefit from going into STEM careers, STEM-related careers. But we are graduating quite a few, to be honest. The problem is that the skills and aptitudes that go with those STEM academic pathways are so valuable that they're all being sucked up by the non-STEM industries. The financial industries, the legal industry. If you look at law firms, they're one of the largest employers of STEM graduates in this country. And why? It's probably economics and financial, right? At least in this state, and I know in many other states, STEM-based industries don't pay nearly as well. But the good news is that in most states, STEM degrees and STEM jobs pay, with those STEM jobs pay about 50% more than the average salary in most states. So there's a lot of good news there. Now, why would STEM, and why is STEM good? Why are we working so closely with our Department of Workforce Services to look at our adult population, which is really what we're talking about here? Why? Well, the beauty of a lot of these jobs that we see out there is that there are multiple entry and exit points, right? And the whole STEM education community is looking at how to build out STEM careers in a very stackable, attainable way. That's the whole talk of all of our STEM community here in Utah is how do we create stackable credentialing for STEM careers, because we need this talent so desperately that we have to make it more accessible. We can't have just that traditional pathway where you are required to go in for 4 to 5 years of your life full-time and get a degree. We have to create credentialing ways in which people can go in, pick up a bit of this training and education, go out, get a job, and come back and continue to stack that credential and move up and upskill and upgrade their job. So that's the good news, is that there's such a demand that the academic partners and the companies are willing to create a more accessible multiple entry and exit point for these training pathways, which is really good news for people who may not be on that traditional four-year path. And so we're seeing a lot of that going on, so I think this will be very amenable to what these prison projects are all about. Because we're trying to work with our adult population a lot more in the state, and I think a lot of other states are recognizing that if they are truly going to meet that demand for STEM talent that they're seeing in their IT and software worlds, in their aerospace and defense and advanced composites, whatever it may be, that they need to focus on the adult population. The traditional student pipeline is not going to be sufficient. And you hear that from the federal level, you hear that on the state and regional level. You have to start looking at our adult population as a valid and a viable talent pool for STEM jobs. There's just no way out of that. So I think my hat's off to Nalini and your team that you are looking at an adult population that has value. Really that's the essence of the talk I wanted to give, is that these are very tractable jobs. The community as a whole that's looking at educating adults and younger students in this recognize that we have to make it accessible. It's no longer the only people who get into these STEM jobs are the really smart kids, because Veronica Cuevas in our program and all the other Veronicas out there prove that the engagement, the problem solving, the hands-on aspect of STEM-based activities really brings in a broader audience and holds them there. And I think that's why our STEM programs are so popular with our underrepresented kids that really are first college goers and need a leg up. And the last thing I want to say is that, when you talk about STEM, and we bring in, and Lena, you're a genius at this, right? You bring in the arts and the humanities so well into your STEM-based talks, right, and your efforts. And I think that's important, because I think what makes STEM-based skills and aptitudes and thus the career path, academic and career pathways, so intriguing in the context that we're talking about tonight is that if you look at any STEM-related effort, it's done in a cultural and a social context. There's nothing we do as scientists and technology developers and innovators that isn't done in that cultural and social context. And when you look at the stem cell research work, you look at genetically modified organisms. We're working on a water management project through the National Science Foundation's EPSCoR program, and I had no idea that water use and management was such an emotional issue. You get out and you talk to people, and they're like, you leave my water alone. I love my green lawn. It's my baby. And you feel like these communities we're trying to work with the watershed management kind of outreach and engagement pieces, they don't want to give up their green lawn. So even water use is an emotional issue for everybody, right? And so everything that we do in this area, in STEM, is socially and culturally contextual and relevant. So I think that makes it STEM-based efforts for academic and career pathways very intriguing to a lot of different people. So I just got my 1 minute, which is perfect because I'm stopping. But thanks, and I hope kind of give you, what we do with STEM in Utah, Nalini, is a wide open door right now. But I do think that it has to be that K to Gray approach. We got to work with our kids because science is diaper ready, because kids come out as natural, curious scientists. But we have to focus on that adult population as well. And if we're going to really address that demand, that is current and necessary now, and we're going to need it for the future to remain competitive and innovative. So, thanks.
Thanks. That was dynamite. Parts of it at first sounded to me, whoa, where is this going? How does it connect back? But by the time you finished speaking, I really understood this connection between, especially concentrating on the adult population as potential contributors to efforts to just make our society better, wherever they might come from, incarcerated or not. I think also your point about the underserved and the underrepresented is especially important when we think about prisons, because we know that there's very often a disparity in terms of the proportion of people represented inside versus outside. So your words about that, especially as being relevant to Utah, are really well appreciated and have really goaded me into thinking about how can we sort of integrate what we're trying to just begin with here with Utah SPP to some of the bigger educational questions that lie outside not only our door, but I'm sure this is true for all of the states that are represented here and across the country. So thanks very much for making those connections for us. And speaking of connections, I just want to sort of wrap up here by making sure that I want to give recognition to each of the groups that has come so far and worked so hard for our conference. And I want to just recognize, and if the person I call, the coordinator of each state, could just stand up and just say maybe 1 or 2 sentences, and I mean 1 or 2 sentences, and we've already been through this at the conference, about what their state is doing. And note that the people I'll be calling are just the appointed coordinators, but the team that they work with, everybody is as important as anyone else. So let me call on first our team from California is virtually here, is that right? So we do have a team from California, but they chose not to increase their carbon footprint, and so they've been beaming in virtually for us through the conference. I'll just recognize Deborah Heisen, who's their coordinator. For Los Angeles, which is a county system, Adrienne Ferre. Did you want to say just a word or two? Or And I want to do this just so that the non-conference people who have come tonight can hear a little bit about the breadth of the projects that are engaging these states.
Thank you, everyone. Chair Baca recognizes the importance of education in incarceration because he not only has to guard the prisons and jails, but he has to make sure the communities in the street are safe, and he has to guard the courts. So it's a cyclical thing, and he recognizes that the more we can do to work with these folks, the greater the impact on citizen and the communities. And we're looking at all aspects from energy generation through revival agriculture and trying to lessen the burden of taxpayers and meet pending state mandates. So it's a very comprehensive project. And thank you, SPP, for all your good work, because we're borrowing an awful lot of ideas from you, and we haven't thought about it smart enough to. It's really a great collaboration.
Thanks very much. We have our wonderful Jill Boone, who's here from Santa Clara County.
Is this on?
Yes.
Okay, another county in California. So we brought a team in September to the SBP workshop in Washington, and we're very inspired. Went back and have started some programs that are integrating sustainability into a lot of our operation programs, landscaping, vermicomposting, composting, greenhouses, recycling, things like that, and incorporating it with education and hopefully job skills and job opportunities for the inmates when they're released. I'm very grateful to SPP for helping us to get started and to be an inspiration. Thank you.
Thanks, Jill. Jenny Hilbrand and her team are here from Ohio.
Okay, we have many different sustainability operations in Ohio, and currently we're working on an endangered species in Ohio, which is rearing the eastern hellbender, which is a salamander. Also, a restoration butterfly project, raising trout and romaine lettuce for the Columbus Zoo, and our partners are the Wilds, Columbus Zoo, and the Ohio University.
Great, thanks. From Oregon, we have Chad Noggle, and he and his team are here.
I'd just like to say that the Department of Corrections in Oregon has joined a network. We've actually increased our communication and our networking in regards to what our sustainable operations were, and we've actually increased conservation efforts and working with nonprofit organizations and collaborating with people in the community to expand and give back to the community and basically breaking down barriers with culture. And because we have 14 institutions, and each institution has a different culture, but breaking down these barriers and motivating our staff and the offenders in there to sustainable operations. We do have gardens in each one of our institutions. We do composting, and we're looking for more future, more collaborations, and it's just been it's like thank the network, because the action plan really got us in gear and motivated us as a department.
Great, thanks, Chad. And last we have John Vashutinsky, and he's representing Multnomah County in Oregon.
Thank you. We were able to show Sheriff Dancy from Multnomah County the work that
Great. Who? Oh, Marilyn. Oh, my gosh. How can I forget Bill? So Bill, Bill Merritt will represent Maryland.
Hi, I'm Bill Merritt. And in Maryland, we currently have several different sustainability programs, everything from canine working dog programs, vet dog programs. We have horse rescue. We have gardens and things like that. There's two things that I really want to talk about. Number one, we have a prison that we closed down about 5 years ago, 1,700 bed facility, built in 1868, so it's fairly old. And we are actually doing deconstruction of that, which is going to net us a 90% recycling rate of everything off that facility. We're taking the bricks down, we're going to be reusing those, the porcelain, the copper pipe, the old, everything is being recycled. So there's only going to be about a 10% waste stream from that. In addition to that, I just started working with University of Baltimore County and Dr. Chris Swan, and we're introducing a urban ecological program in Baltimore City. In Baltimore City, there's about 14,000 homes that have been just dropped down and filled the basement in with the rubble. So there's just 14,000 empty lots in Baltimore City. And we're taking 30 of those and going to turn them into an ecological study to see which types of grasses grow best there. An urban agriculture study and a couple of different things, including taking a look at different pollinators and things along with that. So we're excited, very happy to be part of the network. They've been a huge help to me, been a huge help to our program. So I just want to thank everyone.
Thanks, Bill. You have another word?
Something just occurred to me. Well, first of all, this is the most creative group I've come across in a long time. Fantastic
Hang out
work.
with us.
I want to. I'm like going, ooh, I want to be a part of this. But something occurred to me too. This group seems to be all about collaborations and partnerships, which is fantastic. And I know Ohio and Washington for certain. I'm very familiar with your STEM initiatives, the Ohio STEM Learners Network, as well as Washington State's STEM initiative. So, I know California's got multiple STEM initiatives going on, depending upon whether you're in one of the 3 states that California is represented. But and Oregon, I believe, has one. But I would encourage you guys, if you haven't already, connect with your STEM initiatives in the state, because I think they would gain a lot from talking to your group, and it may be that you can align with some of their efforts on a state level to find some resources and leveraging that you can do, if you haven't done it already. So,
great. Thanks for opening that portal. That's a great idea. So just before we finish up, I wanted to just let you know what we're going to be doing next in terms of the SPP conference attendees. So what we've done is get acquainted with the project. Each state has written up with great effort its own state action plan, and what we're doing now is pulling those together, finding what emerges from them to create a national action plan. And our idea is to create a national network. It's already well on its way. We hope to augment it and to have it serve the people here and in other states from all 4 of these different worlds of academics, correction, sustainability, and conservation. So please sort of keep aware that this is all going on. If you have comments, you can bring them to us here in Utah and we can funnel them to the network. But I think there are lots of ideas, lots of opportunities for creativity and collaboration. So it's almost time to be over here in terms of our official program, but I wanted to open it up for questions in case there's a burning question that you might want to ask from the whole group or of the whole group. If not, we still have about a half an hour where you can mingle around, look at the posters, and chat with people now that you know where they're from. So are there any questions that any of our speakers could answer? Dan, did you have a question? No questions. If not, I would like to thank everybody for coming tonight, and I would love to thank the Washington SPP and the Network Office for their incredible leadership and work in terms of helping out all of these states' efforts and being helped by all of these states' efforts. So thank you again.